Greetings, fellow moviegoers, and welcome to Movie Central, the place to talk about movies, TV shows based on movies, toys based on movies, games based on movies, and rides based on movies. I'm your host, Mr. CCS, and this is my pet gorilla, George. Now, I want you to know something. In an alternate timeline, humans are in the midst of a war with machines. How do we even have a world where that's the case? Well, it all comes down to Canadian filmmaker James Cameron. While back in Italy in the early 1980s, Cameron had a fever dream of a killer robot holding kitchen knives, avoiding an explosion. Wanting to do something different, Cameron decided to take that idea and run with it, turning it into a slasher film akin to John Carpenter's Halloween. While initially the idea was to have two robots being sent back to the past, one normal but the other one liquid metal, Cameron thought that the technology would be insufficient to support the second android. At least until 1991. After Orion Pictures picked up the project, and numerous projects interfering with the film, it was finally released on October 26, 1984, topping the box office, scoring big with critics, and being one of the few movies to gain a perfect score of 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, which means every critic must have enjoyed this movie in one way or another. However, nearly 40 years later, does this movie hold up? We're going to find out today. This is the 1984 science fiction action slasher movie, The Terminator. Disguised as a human, a cyborg assassin known as a Terminator, played by the iconic Arnold Schwarzenegger, travels from 2029 to 1984 to kill Sarah Connor, played by Linda Hamilton. Sent to protect Sarah is Kyle Reese, played by Michael Biehn, who divulges the coming of Skynet, an artificial intelligence system that will spark a nuclear holocaust. Sarah is targeted because Skynet knows that her unborn son will lead the fight against them. With the virtually unstoppable Terminator in pursuit, she and Kyle attempt to escape. Those who know me or are getting to know me must know this. The Terminator is on my list of all-time favorite horror movies and on my list for all-time favorite movies. It is as pure of a horror film as you can get, and it isn't even classified as horror. Regardless, this is the movie that modern monster films with a killer robot wished. This is what Chappie wishes it was. This is what the Child's Play remake wishes it was. This is what Megan wishes it was. This is what Five Nights at Freddy's wishes it was. Those all tried to copy the success of this film, but didn't even come close. That's how good The Terminator is. The only movie to top this one in concept is its own sequel, but I'll get there eventually. The idea of a killer robot traveling back in time to kill the mother of the leader of the resistance that will stop the machines is an ingenious idea. And the film takes full advantage of it by making every ounce of it engaging and downright frightening. So, with that said, what else makes The Terminator as iconic as it is today? Well, let's find out. Let's start with the characters. While Linda Hamilton was a prominent actress in the 1980s, she didn't become a well-known star until this movie. Yes, she is a waitress and is being hunted down by a killer robot, meaning she's scared for her life. However, by the end, she does actually manage to hold her own against the damn thing, and even is the one to kill it off. This is one of Linda Hamilton's finest characters, and would only become even better in the sequel, where she is much more interesting, and one of pop culture's greatest female leads of all time. But we have to start somewhere, and this was one hell of a place to start. As far as our male lead goes, we have Kyle Reese. Reese is a soldier serving in 2029, and he has seen quite a lot in his time, watching people die and battling many machines. He's a young man, but he's been through so much and he looks a lot older than he actually is. Regardless, in order to protect the future, he's sent back in time to protect Sarah from being killed by the machine, while at the same time fathering John due to him and Sarah sleeping together. Yeah, that's a whole can of worms that I don't need to dive into. Even when injured, Reese fights till the bitter end of his life, sacrificing his own life to save Sarah's, and John's in the process as well. Once again, this is a very good character, and while not as memorable as Sarah, Michael Biehn did an incredible job, which made it all the more wonderful that he played Hicks in Aliens. As far as the other characters go, Dr. Silberman, played by Earl Bowen, was interesting, but wouldn't become as useful to the plot until T2, and the cops are just cannon fodder, though I have to admit it was cool seeing Paul Winfield in However, the reason why this movie is as fondly remembered as it is all comes down to one character and the titular villain, the Terminator itself. Initially, Michael Biehn was supposed to play the machine, and Arnold was supposed to play Reese. However, Arnold's body type, deep voice, and intimidation factor swayed Cameron, who swapped the roles with a snap of his fingers, and that was one of the best moves in Hollywood history because we got one of cinema's most iconic villains. The T-800 shows off its intimidation factor by killing simple street thugs and taking their clothes, followed by shooting a gun store owner and slaughtering several women with Sarah Connor in an attempt to find the right one. It didn't count on Reese attempting to stop him, which leads it to adopt a leather jacket and sunglasses to continue its hunt, being an unstoppable war machine, of course, with the side effect of absolutely cool. Even when its human flesh is melted off, it still persists, finally being destroyed by a hydraulic press. This is how you make an intimidating horror movie villain. Make it not much for speaking, relentless, and overall frightening. You have yourself something special. And they knew that back in 1984 and 1990. Unfortunately, they completely dropped the ball in 2003, 2009, 2015, and 2019. But that's beyond the point. The people behind this movie did such an incredible job with this character, and I can't praise them enough. Overall, the characters work really well for a monster movie. The final girl, the determined fighter, the ignorant bystanders, and the relentless monster. Need I say more why I think this is a pure horror movie? Yes. Yes, I do. Because now we have to talk about the effects. First things first, the Terminator's design. This was done by legendary Oscar-winning Stan Winston, who would later go on to design the Human Xenomorph, the Predator, the dinosaurs from Jurassic Park, and the cannibals from the Wrong Turn movies. And he knew how to make something frightening. The Terminator is one of his most iconic creations, and I'd argue it's one of his best, second only to the Jurassic Park dinosaurs. Other than that, the stop-motion effects still hold up extremely well. The makeup to make Arnold look like his skin is being peeled off is grotesque and terrifying, and overall the movie looks like pure sci-fi horror genius. There's not much more I can praise for the effects. As far as the music goes, the score was composed by Brad Fiedel, and I thought he did a great job. The score uses heavy amounts of synthesizer, and while I prefer orchestral music, I think the synth works really well for this movie and gives it a distinct classic feel. My favorite pieces have to be the main theme and the motif of the 4 drums that plays often when the Terminator is menacingly walking around the streets of LA. And finally, the scare factor. While its main genre isn't horror, it pulls off a lot of tension extremely well, especially during the scene in the apartment, the first car chase scene, the police station scene, and the final climactic battle with the tanker in the factory. It keeps you on the edge of your seat, especially because you care about the 2 leads and worry that they might die. That's effective stuff right there. So, overall, The Terminator is a pure horror movie, and an inspiring one at that. Even though it may not be classified as horror, it is very much horror in many regards. If you had to pick one monster movie to watch for inspiration, This is one you must watch in order to understand how to write something absolutely special and spectacular, which is why this movie earns a 10 out of 10. Watch out for killer robots and time travelers and give this one a watch. Well, that's it for this review. Feel free to leave your thoughts on this movie in the comments section below, and tune in next week for another review. You might be wondering why I'm not teasing the next reviews as much as I used to, and that's because surprises are always better. With that said, my name is Mr. CTS, this is Movie Central, and that, my friends, is a wrap. See you next week.